So as I say, we're going to be looking at the visual framing of social issues. Michael is the founder and publisher of Reading the Pictures, and also now kind of, I suppose, a little offshoot called Chatting the Pictures, where you do videos. And we have been partnering on those and sharing some of them on the VII Insider blog, which is fantastic. We're going to keep on doing a selection of those. Michael's also a clinical psychologist, as we heard earlier, based in Berkeley, California. To start with, Michael, just tell us a little bit about when did Reading the Pictures begin and what was your purpose when you set it up?
So Reading the Pictures started in 2004, which means that we're almost 20 years old, and it's no coincidence that it started almost coincident with the birth of the social net. And I was doing a political cartoon on a lunch bag for my kids, and then this blogosphere thing happened, and they were getting older, and I got very interested in the political space, but also like the visuals, political visuals. I was looking at the Bush-Kerry campaign, and the guy running the Bush campaign, Karl Rove, had the famous phrase, "Politics is TV with the sound off," and he was really a master at the way that they were visually framing Bush. There was a lot of sites that started getting popularity really quickly in the blogosphere, but nobody was talking about visual narrative, photography, political use of imagery. And so I started doing that and quickly earned a spot in the, in the community. So that's what, like 18, 19 years ago. So, we've been morphing kind of at the speed of the internet. And so, we've gone through a lot of changes, and especially when Instagram hit 12 years ago and the culture started becoming extremely visual and people started becoming a lot more literate, in some way our role changed, but it really was as much about curation as it was about the narrative of imagery.
Right, right. As I said at the beginning, you're also a clinical psychologist and organizational consultant. You balance these two things. Do you bring things from your background in clinical psychology to your reading of the images, and if so, how?
Well, from the beginning, and I guess it's underpinned the mission and still does, is interested in the context of images, the narrative of images, how it connects to the political space and the cultural space, and then also the aspect of character, because especially as over those years, political personality, or I would even say like political celebrity, has become so dominant, maybe predominant. So I think the understanding, my background in character analysis also informs, how you look at, whether it's the representation of a person or the representation in as we're sitting there with you in a clinical space, or how that image functions in a social space.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, your methodology, because you're focused principally on news photography, principally in North America, sometimes in Europe as well. That's a huge scope even by itself. How do you go about accessing images? How do you make a selection, and how do you decide on which are the ones that stand out for you and you want to analyze and comment on?
Well, that question probably deserves a different answer every couple of years. So like how back in the day, and let's say whatever 15 years ago, there'd be maybe one photo a month that would kind of break into public consciousness, usually through newspapers. And so then over these years, it's been like maybe one a week to now it's like 3, 4, sometimes 2, 3, 4 a day. So it's really like that's where no one ever thought about us as curators or in the past, but now because it's such a fire hose, and also because there's in our persuasion culture, so many people are broadcasting out images, and that all the way down to the individual level.
Right.
It's a real challenge, and I think a real need to be able to say, what's the 1 or 2 or 3 images from some major event, let's say like Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, that people need to pay some attention to, and what are the images that are more insightful or more editorial, that have probably catch a theme or a set of themes, in fact, more than others. So we're looking at images, news and media images for meaning, trends, context, fairness. So all that criteria comes into play. And then I guess through the presentation today, you'll see images that we are picking up, but mostly because we feel like they have the most narrative,
right,
and then also have the most impact and power from visual standpoint, from an aesthetic standpoint.
Yeah. And as I said, you're principally focused on North America. Is that fair to say? And if so, how do you think about whether the approach you take might or might not be applicable to political and geographic contexts outside of North America?
That's totally fair to say. And we have a very healthy respect for how the understanding of images can stop at our shores. So it's interesting, if you're talking about body language, like Paul Ekman, if you know his work, he says that body language is extraordinarily consistent across all cultures and history, and he's done a lot of research to back that up. So if we're talking about Chairman Xi's kind of posture, or the young head of the Saudi Arabian state, that's one thing. But no, we tread very carefully, actually, in terms of once we move into international imagery, especially if you're like, say, talking about the double standard or discrepancies, I would call it double standard in, say, like the depiction of graphic imagery. So you have to have a lot of healthy respect and appreciate the the differences there culturally.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into some more issues and more questions like that. Why don't you take us through the presentation, because I think that this is what people have come to see, and seeing the images and talking them through will flesh out these issues some more.
Absolutely. And I would say that in terms of the title, the presentation probably morphed as I was working on it into visual trends and framing of social issues.
Right.
So, we'll be looking at artistry, storytelling, focuses on climate. We're very much into climate these days, and looking at beyond the culture war, and if there's time, some key trends in news photography. Great. So let me just share my screen here. You see that?
That's good. Full
okay,
screen.
Awesome. So
Sean Triplett's photograph.
Yeah, I got a little ahead of myself. So as our culture is steeped in visuality, news images keep getting more creative and multi-layered. And we at Reading the Pictures really mean that, because we kind of delve into all the layers. And if you watch our Chatting the Pictures videos, we spend 3 minutes going through and deconstructing the images that we're highlighting. So right, this is Sean Triplett's photograph. It shows tornado debris inside the theater the American Legion building in Mayfield, Kentucky in December of 2021. That was the deadliest long track tornado that was ever recorded, killing 66 people and leaving the town in ruins. And it is, I think, a provocative image, a challenging image, as much as it's just a really sensual and sensational image. It's talking about, both like kind of reflects and then straddles the line between entertainment and information. It's like, as much as we're seeing like evidence of the destruction that day, it's also saying that like everything is very mediated now. All the world's a stage. So we did a Chatting the Pictures on this particular photo because of how much it was a commentary on spectacle and spectatorship in this age of both social media and catastrophe. This image, you talk about Europe and America, and it's funny because this photo was taken by a photographer for EPA. Their pictures do not circulate that much in the United States. So one of my favorite photo sources is The Guardian, and their pictures of the week and their photo editing is stellar. And I didn't see this picture anywhere in the States, but the minute I saw it, we're living this time where, of apocalypse, and especially, and then also denial. And this summer, I guess you could argue, has been a tipping point, but, outside of like, these kind of more spread out catastrophic events, climate events, it's like there's still a lot of disbelief, especially at the political level. So, this photo just like immediately, knocked me out. Yeah. It was taken in Spain. They're firefighters battling this blaze. If you're in Europe, you know that this was just a hellacious summer, record heat, record amount of fire. And this really puts our helplessness in perspective and the challenge. Yeah, I was writing, I think it was on Twitter. That's where we're doing most of our posting these days. Is really, you could say this is the climate crisis springing the lock on Pandora's box.
Yeah. And Michael, just a technical point. There's a black cursor in the middle of the screen. Is it possible to move that?
Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay. So, it's also like the stuff of myth, it's this, the viper that nature let loose. So Alberto Szczesnik, and I'm sure I mispronounced his last name, but it's an astonishing photo, and it really, it says a lot about our predicament, and we just need these kind of wake up calls as much as we can these days visually, and photography is really delivering, and has been for quite a few years. This, I think, is just such an interesting photograph. Photographers are going to look at this, and I imagine they'll say, oh, what's the big deal about this photograph? It's a background, and I've been to a million of these things, and Biden's walking on a stage, and they just 2 seconds, they stretch this canvas and boom. But I don't see it that way. I see like more, it has this kind of split screen effect. This was taken in Somerset, Massachusetts. Biden is doing remarks on climate change and renewable energy at this former power plant. This was taken also 3 weeks before the Senate passed that landmark climate bill, which, by the way, nobody expected to pass. So, he was really beating the drum at this point, but without much success. And I love how Jonathan Ernst, very successful photographer with Reuters. He's been working for quite some time. I love how Jonathan used the angle and the backdrop, to create something I consider magical. It's Biden. It's sort of inspired by video games and VR in a way, but it's like Biden stepping into the green energy future. And it's got that kind of, the line drawing and the abstraction and the, the new, our new orientation of farming. And it's just a wonderful shot, very creative. And news photography continues to get more creative, as well as more narratively dense. And I'm just amazed how they continue to kind of up that game.
Do you think they have to get more creative so that images stand out? Do you think that's a conscious strategy? What's driving what you see as the increased creativity?
I think it has to rise above the level of the greater richness and narrative of imagery these days. If you look at Twitter and you see pictures that actually the hive mind or the group mind is now elevating for discussion, and you just read the the comment threads, Twitter's got a really bad reputation, especially political Twitter, for just like a lot of like fisticuffs and all of that. But when you just read people's response to photographs, I'm amazed at how astute people are. And it's not just where they also are doing all this kind of like research for you, where they remember that this was taken here, there was 3 other pictures that were antecedents to it, if you will. A lot of different, people are seeing an amazing amount of the culture. People weren't doing that before, and they didn't have as much material to work with. So I just think the level has gotten so high, and the photos are so rich and so informative and so, unique that, on one hand, you can think it's a guy who quit the patent office in the 1900s because he thought there wasn't anything, that new to be discovered, and then someone walked in with the the locomotive. So yeah, I think that's what's happening today with photos, and it's great. I think it's amazing. So which takes us to narrative and storytelling, and it's really funny because our basic premise is that people, even and sometimes especially visual professionals, don't spend enough time talking about the information and meaning contained and the elements and the composition of individual pictures. So, it's sort of like, here's an incredible photograph, people like kill themselves to, in sometimes cases literally, to like get not just the shots, but that one shot, and the way it's posed, and the way that this person relates to that person, and the way that, in the background you see, which is a reference to, the American invasion, when now you see like the country has taken over, regain the country, just like all these elements that, that are there to be seen and understood, but are often missed. So, I mean, that's pretty much where we live. So this photograph was taken by Wendy Cardona. She's or at the time was a registered nurse at the Good Samaritan Hospital in Lafayette, Colorado. Her surgical team was observing that massive winter firestorm that struck Boulder County back in December of 21. And what was really shocking, again, wake-up call, was how this combination of climate conditions, including drought, very high temperatures, unusually high temperatures for the winter, and very high winds, created this firestorm that not only destroyed over 1,000 structures, but came within 3 blocks of the facility. And another picture that hasn't been seen that widely, actually, I think that it was, she posted it on her Instagram, and then someone picked it up on Reddit, and then some news agencies ran it. But to me, this is, again, this climate crisis red flag when it comes to specifically overdevelopment and the vulnerability of the suburbs. And, like, no one's putting, now people are starting to talk more about, checks and balances in terms of, development and building. But, it's like cat's been like way out of the bag in terms of, what we've set ourselves up for. So also, you have here the themes of first responders and spectatorship. And, what's really powerful and painful about this picture is that, the helpers are helpless. And I spoke to Wendy actually, and she pointed out the fact that there were nobody who was injured showed up at the hospital. So I mean, then there's this also, like, just aesthetically too, the painterly quality of this, like, beauty and destruction, which is something that we're seeing a lot of. And then the whole dialogue between the window, which Cara Finnegan, my partner on the China pictures, kind of equated to like the Instagram square. But there's also that in dialogue with the cell phone, and so always like informational sources, and then real time, and then but virtual versus actual, and how that's starting to like and this really shows how they're like conflating, or the distinction is breaking down. And and that's, the sociologist can run with that, but for better or worse, I would say. But like the medley of windows. Excuse me. Most of these pictures, by the way, we have done or we've focused, have the subject of China pictures videos, and the China pictures videos, if you can find them most easily on our Instagram feed, and then on our website under the video section. We do about 4 to 6 a month. They're about 3 to 4 minutes each. They're highly edited. They're a very deep dive on these key social political photos. And then we also cut in related images. These are like highly edited, so you just get like the nugget, the good stuff. And I work with Professor Cara Finnegan on these. She's a visual historian and professor of communication at the University of Illinois. She's amazing, and her expertise is on the visual depiction of US presidents. We actually, we're just finishing the production on this one. So you'll see the kind of the full-blown analysis in the next couple of days. But this shows firefighters tackling a fire in the Guarda district in central Portugal. And this was literally like weeks ago. And then, as you know, the fire's been raging throughout the Western Mediterranean since July. And some of the smoke, there is obscuring skyscrapers in Madrid. So it's like the power of this photo, though, lies in the juxtaposition of the smoke and the fire on the left, and then the wind turbine on the right, and then kind of almost the sense of the road like cutting them in half also. So it's kind of like, is it either or, like and then when you look at the firefighters who are not really fighting the fire, but really the way they're posed, they look more like witnesses, or maybe like like kind of, this is beyond us. It's really asking us, it's a fourth narrative here. It's like, it's demanding that you try and understand and relate to, our condition based on the tension in this picture. It's like you need to resolve it. So, I mean, what does it say? And again, this is the beauty and the power of news photography, and especially as it becomes more elevated in the ways we were just discussing, is could you call this like green energy, too little, too late? Is there kind of a Don Quixote vibe here, especially like with the analogy to the windmill? What does this have to, what does this have to say in terms of where we're at? Because we're supposed to be, even if it's like late in the game, wind energy and solar is supposed to be our salvation, but can we get there? And I think this picture is really like really going right there. It's an incredible photograph.
Yeah, Bob Harriman just posted a comment to say perhaps Phoenix rising out of the ashes.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Bob. I couldn't have said that better.
And so just by the way, if put some comments in chat and so on, if you have particular questions, put them in the Q&A box. I'll bring those in as we go along, or we'll come to them at the end, just a reminder for folks in the audience.
Yeah, the Phoenix rising out of the ashes takes more of a positive take on it, and that's that is warms my heart. I was really interested in talking to you about this, David, especially because you also have like, kind of, we're talking about two sides of the pond, like I know you're not from England, but you're certainly like, relate very much more closely to the monarchy than we do. Queen Elizabeth dies, and what you get, because she was incredibly savvy her entire life about populism and imagery, you have this. I mean, I've never, when a major event that has like a strong social, a visual component takes place, it's good for like, at the most, maybe 2 days, three days, at least on social. Excuse me. The Queen is going on 5, maybe 6. I mean, wait, hold on one second.
Well, given the official period of mourning, maybe 10.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think this will be certainly. So I'm located in England, as you say. I'm from Australia. That means that I have the Queen twice because she's head of state for both states. Was head of state for both states.
Well, yeah.
And the television coverage here on the main terrestrial channels is wall to wall the period of mourning and the preparations for the funeral and the public reaction. So yeah, I think this is going to be, it's an historic event, and it's one that will go on much longer than most.
And you're talking about like the events that follow, and those are extraordinarily newsworthy. But as much as that is going to be really fascinating, the fact that she pretty much pulled like 3 days of retrospective images. I mean, time covers from this like so much imagery, different imagery, fascinating imagery. So it raised a challenge for photo editors. I think a lot about photo editors and appreciate what they do. And sometimes I'm critical, but it's like amazing work that they do and the skills they bring. And it was like, here you are, the Queen dies. It's the next day, and you're the front page editor at either like the LA Times or the New York Times. And what is the one image from like all the years? What's we can talk about iconicity or whatever, but like, what's the one image you use? I have to say that the fact that the Los Angeles Times and the New York, this does happen sometimes, but not, but the fact that both these organizations chose the exact same photograph was kind of mind-blowing to me.
Yes.
And then just a little bit of background on the image. By the way, you see the LA Times version is darker, a little more foreboding.
Yes.
And it's the picture, by the way, was taken in 2007. It shows the Queen traveling down the mall from Buckingham Palace to the Palace, Westminster, in her horse-drawn Irish state coach to attend the state opening of Parliament. She's going to give the Queen's speech, but like for a while, I just couldn't. I wasn't sure what to make of this choice. And it was taken by Max Mumbry in 2007. I had never seen it before, and I have thoughts on what makes it the photograph. But I'm really curious about how you see the selection.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm just going to bring in a comment by Kent, which is really interesting on this one.
Beautiful.
If you enlarge the photo, or if you look closely at the middle frame, the glass reflection almost looks like a tear coming down the cheek. And, it looks, I think that's an incredible observation, Ken. And again, you can keep looking at images and finding out all these details and all these interesting things. I mean, 2 things strike me about this one. I mean, it's very interesting the LA Times and New York Times picked the same thing. I don't think it's been that prominent in the British media itself.
Yes.
If you'd looked at the front pages of the British media on the day or the day after, you saw an extraordinary range of different photos from different years, going right back to the 1950s, the 1960s, and so on. And it was
Yes.
very striking how some papers took what would have been quite nostalgic images of a very young queen and put those on the front page, others more old, and so on. Cecil Beaton photographs were very prominent. He had obviously taken a number of pictures and so on. So it's interesting to me that this did not appear quite so prominently in the UK. I don't know what to make of that between the two countries. The two things that strike me about it are, one, it's black and white in both those locations. So therefore kind of giving it some sort of sense of historical archive, I think. But then you've got the three frames and she's in the middle frame, as though it's already a framed photograph on the wall as kind of an icon of memory itself. They're the things that would stand out for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is playing, the way I'm thinking about it is it's really playing with time and also the temporal.
Yep.
You know, it's you know, in some way it's like her being behind glass and being framed in a way where it looks like you can see it almost as like her being in a picture frame. Is like, is she already consigned to, like she's consigned to the frame? Is she lost to history?
Yeah.
But also, like, you know, actually as a psychotherapist, a theme that comes up a lot that people don't necessarily give that much credence to is transition and the experience of transition. And because she was such a major figure and almost and ubiquitous and, you know, and so powerful, her death is less like kind of she's here and she's gone than almost like putting her in this kind of, you know, you have to adjust, and especially the English have to adjust to, you know, her loss. So I think that they chose this picture because it's like this liminal kind of experience that it gives. And yes, it's something that the Americans would probably be more, you know, clued into, because like all those cover images the next day in the Times and in the Guardian, and like we're very much Queen Elizabeth in her 20s and her 30s, super nostalgic.
Yeah, a couple of interesting observations from folks. Same observation from both Kate and Jane, saying she looks like she's behind bars, a prisoner of duty, or you can see her suffering and imprisoned with her heavy ornamentation. Let's see, Millicent says the image gives off ivory tower vibes, separated from the common folk. Lisa says it shows her intelligence. Andreas says, to me, in the present context, it gives you the vibe the Queen is looking at you, feeling sad she had to pass.
That's really sweet.
Molly says, makes me think of 1930s film noir.
Those are all great. And that's the power of photojournalism too, you know, this subjectivity and how it, you know, it really is not going for one thing, but it's like, you know, it's hitting multiple chords. And that's the great images do that.
Yeah, and final one, which I think is, I mean, we could go on, I think, for a long time on this one. But Mel and I think Joe point out religious triptych.
Oh, nice, Mel.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to move on. Also, so climate was a subject of a number of the pictures we already looked at, but these I feel are like really like seminal as well as very powerful. I love this photograph that Justin Sullivan took of the Caldor fire in August 21 near near Lake Tahoe, huge fire. And to me, what this is doing is it says how much, and you know, this wasn't as apparent a couple, you know, maybe a year ago, but and now it is. And so this in some way like really emphasizes that we're well on our way to the breakdown of seasons. And, you know, it's just surreal how, you know, it captures, you know, it's showing us like the ski slope, but here we are like, you know, in this burn and the dryness and also like this otherworldly, like kind of this Martian scape. So that is that leads us to this photograph that's this year by John Locker for the AP. And it's this formerly sunken boat sitting upright in the air in Lake Mead. It's funny, Lake Mead, not funny, but interesting how Lake Mead has become a visual barometer of the climate crisis in the news media, at least here in the United States. Serves all these Western states. It's a critical body of water. It's been going down, down, down. It's really serious situation. And this was before this whole body of, pardon the pun, I guess, but body of images showing drought around the world, and then all of these different artifacts being surfacing from the drought. This was the first one that I saw, first photo that really punctuated that. And that we could be saying, looking at this as like a headstone for humanity, a monument to a crisis nobody wants to really deal with. And then it's also interesting that if you look at the people on the boat, and we will zoom in and move around, a photograph. That's really trademark for what we do. And when you do that, or when we did that in the Chatting pictures that we did on this photograph, you can see that the people on the boat are still pretty much or on the pontoon, they're still pretty much in leisure mode. So it's sort of like, we got that kind of Rome fiddles thing going on here too. I wrote a piece 2 years ago for Columbia Journalism Review about the depiction of the heat dome in the Pacific Northwest and Western Canada, and how images of the heat waves were overwhelmingly illustrated by water play, mostly featuring people are often children frolicking in pools, lakes, and fountains. You can read the article. I'll just show one example that was pretty shocking to me, which is this. I think this was from a Canadian publication, actually, and you can just see the juxtaposition between the headline and the photograph. Hundreds dead as record-breaking heat wave hits Canada, US, and there's a girl in a fountain. So I would say, and I'm very happy to say, in the 2 years that the problem has gained, has worsened. The visual coverage has gotten a lot better. We're seeing more images of like heat shelters and people stressed or succumbing to heat, sweltering in the London Tube, but it's still like pretty prevalent. It's like, and in Spain, I think they're actually for the first time named a heat wave. And why don't we have like heat wave John or heat wave Harriet? And that's
like the way storms and cyclones and hurricanes are named.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see that happen really quickly. But it's just indicative, and the heat is killing people at a much higher rate than any other disaster or climate disaster. But it doesn't have that immediacy of like the people in Kentucky being like being devastated by flooding, or Pakistan right now, a third of the country underwater. But these two this image and the next one, I think, are indicative of that change. And I think this is a wonderful photograph by Brandon Bell for Getty. It shows his family, the Johnsons, in Houston this past June. And the picture is like more domestic. It's more everyday. It cues for endurance. Certainly the stress and the power grid with all of the fans outside, and also speaks to climate crisis and the heat emergencies as disproportionately impacting people of color. I think this photograph is really great for a couple of kind of not that typical reasons. This picture John Sibley took of the Queen's Guard, a member of the Queen's Guard outside Buckingham Palace during England's record heat-breaking heat wave this summer. I like this. We did the long view shot. There's like much tighter ones, some super tight ones, like this for kind of trying to get to the big picture. And this picture went viral and people found it like really funny. And, you know, humor is not bad if it like, you know, is a way to kind of temper and get the message in there. Probably there's not nearly enough of it. But, you know, this is really a wake up call. And then in terms of being in front of Buckingham Palace, you know, and it also, in my mind anyway, screams for the need to examine, you know, how we do business, because, you know, if governments and leaders can't get the policy right, I mean, what's there even going to be left to guard, right?
That's very
like,
dystopian.
wow.
Yes.
Yeah, like wake up. I just threw a few pictures in here. You know, the culture war, and we're inundated by pictures of police clashing with protesters and rioting, and people like, you know, the pictures we saw outside the Supreme Court, you know, of pro-life or pro-abortion and anti-abortion. You got to really get the semantics right on this now. You know, so I found there's some pictures that and sometimes I just collect them and hold them for a while, but some that are like more nuanced and try to get like, you know, kind of underneath that kind of just the black and white, or like the more tense kind of depictions, the stuff that, you know, kind of makes the headlines. And this was a story that Michael Robinson Chavez did in Washington, D.C. It was published in May 2021. And it shows white police trainees getting to know residents of Southeast Washington. And these are these tours that the police department were doing that were designed to give recruits a better understanding of the city and its culture. And I think that, again, the photos are just, as well as depicting this outreach, they're notable for inverting the familiar tension and power dynamic. So, and the title of the article was great too. It said, DC police recruits are learning about Black history, go-go music, and half smokes. Leaders think it will make them better officers. So, I mean, look at in terms of the height, you know, and who's down below and who's up above. I mean, my goodness. And it's really more like the police are the other. And and then especially with, like, you know, children and the child in the foreground, and how much it's like we're talking about perceptions and formative perceptions. I think it's like a very interesting exercise how much it carries through as these people, like, you know, become, you know, grow in their careers. I don't know, but, you know, it's very powerful just as a model or suggestion. And then here's one more. This is a man popping a wheelie on his motorcycle as he passes in front of these trainees. And the tour was given by neighborhood activists and residents in the Woodland Terrace area. So I think, again, it's like fantastic juxtaposition. This is a really wonderful photograph. I did a talk at Photoville with Cara 2 years ago. And we were talking about the unique way that women, Black women photojournalists were documenting civil rights protests. And the majority of the photographs that we looked at, and the majority of the photographs that, you know, we were seeing, you know, really sidestep the more typical confrontational protest imageries. And there's more an emphasis on identity and character, empowerment, and intimacy. And this picture by Sarah Beth Maney shows Breonna Noble riding her horse through the streets of downtown Oakland at the start of a George Floyd protest. And, you know, oh my goodness, you know, it just defies historical symbols of oppression, slavery, and the master. You know, it reframes core American and white male symbolism. You know, it's resonating with the new frontier and the rodeo and the 4-H club and Ronald Reagan and everything that's, you know, like kind of been endemic to, you know, kind of legacy and white legacy America. And besides defying urban stereotypes, it's like this extraordinary depiction of stature and power. So incredible image.
Yeah. Michael, can you flick back to the photo of the police outside the people's house, the one before that one?
Yes.
When you sent me the edit for this, I was looking through it. This one just stood out for me. I found this picture so disturbing in so many ways. I thought the idea of a group of police all in flak jackets, all in masks outside, going around looking in. It looks like they're looking into people's houses as though they're in some sort of imperial exhibition of,
like the zoo.
Like the zoo, like, you know, those imperial exhibitions where, quote, African tribes people were brought to Belgium or something to be shown off and inspected. And yet this is an attempt to bring communities closer together. All I see is division and difference. I found a really disturbing image.
No, I'm really glad that you took us back, because like I was saying, you know, the intention can be great, but you know, these types of imagery and projects really do cut both ways. I'm kind of interested if you're seeing people in the chat, and what responses you might be seeing in the audience, because these are seminars, you know, in terms of what we do.
Yeah. No, I think one saying indeed in response to the comments I was making, and Tony's saying the picture of the guy on the motorcycle shows depth. The boarded windows in the background are certainly part of the story. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's a really important point, because, you know, again, you know, when you talk about the media, and the media is not, you know, a objective institution, and we're talking about corporate media is the media, and you know, it's hard to know how much, you know, the Washington Post is doing some amazing, it's made an amazing commitment to photojournalism. They're doing a lot of difficult, a lot of work, and you know, but you know, it's really tricky in terms of point of view, and you know, being like, still the media and Tara's work, in fact, you know, it's like looking at, and you worked on that too, you know, where she's doing the analysis of diversity, and you know, in photography and amongst editors, and so
a couple of people agreeing about the presence of flak jackets and so on, and Jane pointing out the difference between the flak jacket on the police and kind of the colored sweater on the girl and so on. And if you look, Molly says, if you look even more closely, you see the girl on the ground playing with toys. So she seems unbothered by what's in front of her. So there's all sorts of things going on in that photo. But just from the point of view of, and when I say it's a disturbing picture, I don't mean Chavez, you know, produced a disturbing picture. I mean the scene is disturbing. And then he photographed the disturbing nature of the scene. I just think the idea of I can't get over these police are outdoors wearing masks, and black masks at that. So it's like, what, they expect to catch disease from people that they're seeing in these houses outside,
or maybe from each other, and like peak COVID and all of that too, which is kind of interesting in terms of temporally. But sure, there's definitely like you know, these pictures, these kinds of pictures, and it's why we're choosing, you know, these types of images to talk about. Are they are catalysts, you know, to understand, especially this like very difficult time in our history since you know,
So Andres has an interesting question. So if we take that reading of being critical and disturbing, if you were a photo editor, I mean, the photo editor decided obviously to publish that in a gallery, and then you've selected it from the gallery. But do you think a photo editor thought about that critical reading? Or if they had thought about that critical reading, would they have still published the image to illustrate that event? It's an impossible thing to answer, because we're talking about decision-making and people's intentions and so on, but just speculate for a second in response to Andres's point.
I mean, given our status, we do, like, a lot of people do read us that are in the media and are looking for like kind of the feedback. But so that's a question I probably would ask directly. But I think that in this case, they approached the intentions, you know, honestly. So my assumption is they felt like this was, and if you read the text, by the way, which is also, you know, not only the importance of a caption and a headline, but you know, the text with these more complex issues and complex images is really important. And if you read this article, it goes into great depth in terms of talking about how few of these new recruits were from DC, how a lot of these, mostly white, almost predominantly white new officers have been really kind of sheltered, and and the real impact it had for them to to be touring Southeast Washington with these activists. So but you can get also imbued by that context and the thrust of the article, and not see the greater ramifications of a photograph, especially taken here and in this context singularly, almost 3 years later.
Yeah.
So I think that's where I'd go with that.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in trends, and it's kind of like the narrative and the way that photos are finding their way into the media space is changing all the time. You'll notice with the Wendy Cardona photograph or the Sean Triplett photograph, these are not photographers. These are people that shot these images, went straight to went to Instagram, and then it elevates up into the media. And it's been kind of going that way instead of this way, or kind of both ways for some time now. So I'm really excited and interested in the initiatives driven by Catchlight and Report for America, where they're funding and placing photojournalist fellows with local news organizations. And there's been a lot of talk and a lot of concern, and more recently, funding to try and bring up local news and news sites. And I think what our RFA and Catchlight are doing is really fantastic and really important. And in Catchlight, in the case of Catchlight, and I know that you're on their advisory committee, they are also providing the photo editing. So they've assigned 6, 7 fellows to these different news organizations in California. Some of them are serving specifically ethnic religious communities, and it's heartening and really important. So just as both a shout out and also to see some of the imagery and some of the work. This was taken by Dee Dwyer for the DCist, and she is a 2022-23 Report for America core member. And this shows Arfeni X speaking to a crowd in front of the Supreme Court on Friday, June 24th, which was right after the court struck down Roe versus Wade. And it's, in my mind, quite a study in black and white. It contrasts very much with most of the wire images we're seeing that seem to miss the, and I guess we're still talking about DC here too, that a lot of the wire images seem to miss photographs of local Black leaders, especially women leaders and grassroots groups. And I love the contrast with the building. I love the fist. I love the fervor. I love the person on the foreground on the right, which gives you this sense of more people and strength and determination. I think it's a wonderful image. And who saw this image? It's on DCist, but if you're in DC, this is the quality of imagery, that can really can be a game changer. This photograph was taken by Yek-Yoon Kim. She joined the Connecticut Mirror in June 20 as a Report for America core member. This story chronicles a couple who married late in life and bonded over the woman's love for the E-type Jaguar. Local story. And then this picture was taken by Jimena Matera. She's a Catchlight fellow who's shooting for the highly regarded Berkeley side news site right here in my backyard. And here we see a protester standing down a California Highway Patrol officer at People's Park. The famous protest site is being razed and being replaced by a high-rise for student housing. And there's been a lot of nostalgia and more seriously, a lot of resistance. So this is definitely a trend to keep watching. And I just wish, them all the best. And you can donate, to the Catchlight program and Report from America, to expand it. The trend is opinionated. Now, I'm not sure about this. I've not talked to Megan Loram or like the people at New York Times, but I follow their work very closely. I think that you can say what you will about the New York Times political coverage, but when you look at their quality of their photo department and their photo efforts and the pioneering aspects of it, it's really impressive. And maybe it's a bit subtle in this regard, but if you're wondering where the focus shifted after the New York Times shut down the Lens blog, I think one place to look is their opinion section. And it's really become the place for a lot of visual experimentation. And I know it's important because I'm going there, I'm looking at the front page images across the country. I'm looking at, but this is a landing place for me pretty regularly now. You're seeing like a lot of, what they're doing is marrying really great photography with these opinion pieces. Sometimes where the image informs the story, and then other times you see stories that are given over to like more popular photography. So in this case, you see a Carolyn Drake image pulling for a woman feeling alienated and depressed from the ability to survive in the suburbs. And then this other piece was based on student photos from Fremont High in Oakland, and each photo has a caption written by the student photographer in the story. So they're doing some really, really innovative work there, and particularly in the opinion section. And then lastly, because I know we want to get to questions, I would say, social media, we saw in that Cardona, the fire picture in Denver, how you kind of get this conflation between social and physical. And social that's not a new story at all, but the extent to which social is integrating with the physical world is more and more profound, dizzyingly profound. So I really love this picture. It was taken by Gabriela Bhaskar of Serena Williams taking a selfie with fans after the wonderful first round victory last week at the US Open. And I mean, talk about our intensely mediated world. I mean, this photo is like a hall of mirrors. It's like mediation of mediation. You've got the irony of the newspaper, and I believe it's the New York Times sports section as the backdrop for a photo that ran in the New York Times sports section online. I mean, come on, this is like, it's such an amazing commentary. Not only that, if you still like, but just look at it purely on an aesthetic level. Okay, that's a security guy in the foreground, and he's like trying to grab this thing and hold the newspaper dropping down and everything. But, anybody out there play tennis or played tennis before? Because if you didn't know it, or you stuck a racket in that guy's, right hand, that would look like he's doing a serve.
Yeah, it'd be sort of.
So I mean, you start to see like these layers and dynamics, and then the foreground and the camera there. And, we're so inundated by aerial photography now and drone photography, which is amazing, but we don't think about like the dynamics of something taken from the air. So in fact, this is not a drone picture, not at all. It's the guy standing in the stands, but it's also kind of a commentary on this, because this is how like we're seeing things so much these days. So I just think it's so incredibly brilliant.
Yeah.
So
that's fantastic, Michael. That's been really great tour through that. I mean, you can see by the comments we've had from people and the readings that we've had from people that you've engaged their visual skills and brought out some fascinating points. We've got a couple of questions to look at, and if people want to ask some questions, drop them in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many as we can.
Should I come out of the screen share or leave it, or we'll stay with the
let's
pictures?
Stay with Serena.
Okay.
There's so much going on in that picture. Question from Leslie, and it kind of ties with a question from Andreas. You've provided fantastic readings, your interpretations, and I'm deliberately going to avoid the word subjective because I don't think that applies. subjective is just about an individual opinion and so on. The sort of reading you give is in relationship to the evidence you see in the photo and the context and the caption and so on. This is not subjective, and also subjective no longer apply. If we question objectivity, we have to question the notion of subjectivity too. So, but nonetheless, you're engaged in kind of deep interpretation of these things, bringing lots of points to your encounter with the image and the various layers in the image and so on. So Leslie asks, do you think photographers are shooting with these deeper thoughts in mind, or are you just seeing a strong visual interpretation, or are the photographers seeing a strong visual interpretation to capture? And she says, is there a risk in analyzing the images too deeply? So are the photographers thinking about these deeper thoughts, or just capturing what they think is a strong visual moment, and any risk to an analysis of the layers?
Well, I think that first of all, you've got to talk to different photographers, and I know a lot of them now, and some photographers are really like sages of, and students of culture and the history. I talked to Alan Chin, and you've got like every previous war and leader, and leadership era, but in a photograph. But I think other photographers are more like, they're like poets, and they have this antenna, and they're channeling, all the power and tension and pathos and themes and politics and everything that, if they're on the ground in Bucha or something, that they, that this is all like informing, at a kind of subconscious level, and goes into the image. Yeah, no, I'm really glad actually that we, talked a little bit more about the photograph from Michael Robinson Chavez's photograph in DC, because, these photographs are really a way for us to, they're touching on the tensions, and they're touching on the chords, and I don't feel like we're overreading. I think that I don't think that's a risk, because we do honor that subjectivity, and and a great photograph is going to be broad spectrum, and it's going to like activate people on both sides of, let's say a polarized issue, and and we're here to honor that. I would say that there is, and we started in the political blogosphere, it's like, I would say that we do speak to, at times in the past, I used to talk about like us speaking truth to political power. And I think there are biases in media, and I think there are biases in this country, and they're dire right now. So, to the extent that we get political in our analysis, we're not ashamed about that, as long as we're not, I think, overreading or being too, ideological. There are, there are power differences, and there's, we've got issues like climate that are existential that, people aren't getting after. So, yeah. We will push it that way.
Yeah. Question from Jonathan. Any view about still versus moving images? There's lots more video everywhere these days, but sometimes a still image can be more powerful. And we've been looking at still images and so on. Is that because of your judgment about the power of still images? How do you think about that in relationship to moving images?
I've always believed in the primacy of the still image. And it was funny because I remember sitting down with Chris Hondros like 20 years ago, and that we hit this wave where video became like, people were evangelizing about video, and it's going to replace this the still, and da 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 da. And Chris was saying, like, do I have to, like, now I have to go out and get a video camera? And it is pretty amazing, especially with like all the video that's out there and the way that it's packaged. It still continues to, have that kind of impact. And I think it's because, we have these eidetic minds, and we have eidetic memories, and the things that really stand out with us, whether it's the Hindenburg or the, I mean, I'm aging myself a little bit here, but like, you know, or the Kent State photograph, or, you know, or you know, the Emmett Till in the coffin, you know, these John F. Kennedy, you know, we remember the stills from John F. Kennedy. We don't remember the, you know, the Pruder film so much in our mind. So I think there's something hardwired there. But yeah, I think, and I hope that, you know, that the still image, you know, remains ascendant.
We've got one more question, so there's time. We could squeeze another one in if anyone wants to drop one in. Otherwise, we'll finish with this one from Jane. And Jane, if I phrase this wrongly or have missed the point, please drop a clarification in. She asks, can you comment on the use of great pictures such as the ones you've shown in regard to copyright or, quote, ownership of images? So I'm assuming, Jane, you're asking about Michael having rights to comment on these images. I assume that's the purpose of the question. If I've misunderstood that, then clarify that for us. But can you comment on the use of great pictures such as the ones you've shown in regard to copyright or ownership of images?
Well, back in 2005 to 2012, we used to get cease and desist messages like continuously, like, why are you using our photographs? Why aren't you paying for the photographs? And it hasn't been so much recently, but photographers themselves have like taken issue with us or in our existence, you know, for that reason. But, you know, way early on at the very beginning, we hired, you know, like a top copyright lawyer from the Online Media Association, and he did a finding for us. And, you know, we are under like probably 3 provisions of the copyright code for analysis, education. I forget what the third category is right now, but, you know, we are doing this, and we are a nonprofit, by the way, so we don't make any money from any of these images, and it's really, you know, media criticism, media literacy and photo literacy and visual literacy that is our mission. So yeah, we fall under that umbrella, and but we had to be very careful and clear about that early on. I think at this point people know what we're doing and understand it, but it still bears you know, repeating.
That actually wasn't Jane's intention in that question, she clarified. But nonetheless, I think that was a good question to address, because I think that fair use for public criticism is it's an important part of a democracy.
It's even more important these days in terms of the way photos circulate and people use them, the way that they, we credit like crazy, by the way. If you look on Twitter, you know, if you see that we put something up and we didn't credit, or it's not credited in the screenshot, and that's why we do screenshots with captions. The photographers need the credit.
Jane's point, as she said, was my intent was about, for example, meaning her use or reproducing on Twitter of other people's works, for example, as part of a poster in a climate strike action. I guess it's a struggle with our ethics. So I think it's the ability of the audience to use images, to repurpose images on social media.
She's making a really good point there. Twitter is still like, you know, in a real infancy stage. And when it comes to, I don't even think there is necessarily a photo Twitter at this point, but, you know, this is a funny little anecdote, is that Michael Beschloss, who's the like TV, the well-known historian, and he's on TV all the time, and he blocked us. And the reason is that, and that's too bad, because he runs a lot of photos, and they're photos that are well selected, and they're worth, you know, retweeting with commentary, and we do a lot of retweeting. But he blocked us because we gave him some grief one time about the fact that he never credits a freaking photograph.
Right.
And in fact, we're like almost like militant about that the credit is absolutely necessary. And you can see it here with Gabriella and the New York Times. And we try and like even give like a little bit of context or backstory to the photo and the photographer. So yeah, it's a wild west right now on Twitter. And I would encourage everybody out there, even if it's a pain in the neck, to try, just, you can go onto Google Images, where I spend a lot of time, because I'm not going to repost an image that someone, or retweet an image unless I know who took it.
Right.
So yeah, I best practices. Yeah, great question.
Yeah, and also I think, there are a lot of those history accounts. John Edward Mason is often pointing this out on Twitter too. There are a lot of
John's
history
great.
photo accounts that completely get the date, location totally wrong. And these things are distributed, and it's literally disinformation sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stuff.
Great point.
So you have to be careful about that. Question from Jerry. Have you considered including photographers and/or photo editors in the conversation about their work? Academic and cultural perspectives are well covered, but the commentary sometimes leaves a gap that can be filled by the people who make the photos and make the decisions on whether they are published and the context they're published within. Before you answer that, Michael, say to Jerry, one thing we do on VII Insider is a series with photo editors. I think we have 4 or 5. We're going to carry that on. So check out videos on the video page in the photo editor series where we talk to them about how they work, how they make decisions, and so on. But Michael, your dealings with photo editors and bringing them into the conversation, and photographers too.
Photo editors is one thing, but photographers, we've had photographers over the years. In our those reading the picture salons where we did these hour-and-a-half talks on 6 or 8 key photos on one subject, and to be perfectly frank, we've trended more to having visual academics participate, people who understand photo as rhetoric, and people who have subject matter expertise in a particular subject matter visually. And I think photographers don't necessarily, get into the sociological and anthropological and, and the kind of semiotic and narrative kind of thing that we're about. And if they do, bring it on, and we've used, interviews and we will, but it's case by case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so we're kind of coming towards the end of our time. I'm going to squeeze in one more question from Mel, who seems to be asking questions on behalf of Joe. What about the purely mathematical aspects of composition itself in images? So many of these so many of these photos derive tremendous focus from internal linear compositional elements, which must have had impact on both the choice to use them and on the viral impact in your reading. How are you, in your interpretations, conscious of these mathematical aspects of composition? Do you think they play a significant role?
I think, again, it's intuitive, but I am sometimes thinking about the rule of threes, and and kind of how the things divide. In a picture like this, you can see that there is so much narrative. If we blow this up, or if we did the chatting pictures on this, we would be looking at what's going on, with the person leaning over the rail on the far left, and the group of women in that kind of top center, and then the guy holding up the photograph, and holding up the newspaper, and and the dynamics around that, and then the video guy. So the answer is absolutely yes. And with the way that the pictures are elevating in terms of their visual sophistication, I think it's more and more, in play. But I think we do it more I think I do it more intuitively than, consciously.
Yeah. For example, in this photograph of Serena, the 2 blue walls going to a vanishing point, combining and so on, literally drawing your eye to her in that point of convergence. That's quite something, but that's very mathematical in that sense.
Yes. And I'm not a math person, so I like, kind of terminally liberal arts, so yes. Or I'd probably have more to say.
Yeah, exactly. Michael, this has
been so fun.
Our time is up. It's been absolutely fantastic. We've had a great audience, and as you were talking, I dropped in a web link to the Chatting the Pictures archive so people could see that. I dropped in a web link to your
super.
Columbia Journalism Review article so that people can see that. I think the readings that people have given and the comments they've made on photos show, I mean, obviously we have a visually engaged audience here, that's the case,
Yeah.
but you know, I think if we did this with most audiences, we would get very good readings. And that's one of my little hobby horses is about visual literacy. Visual literacy is very important, but everyone is visually literate. Everyone has a reading on images and can be part of that conversation. No one has to teach anyone to read images.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
In my view, you can't be a human without reading images, you know, from signs to text to photographs, but we've had a very rich conversation about photographs, and it makes me think that we should do more of these where we look at some individual photos and bring the audience in, because I love hearing people's perspectives on that. So you and I will give that some thought, but it's been fantastic having you today, and we look forward to chatting again soon.
Thanks, David. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and you know, see you online.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Bye.
Take care.